Good morning and welcome to the Metro Council Business Meeting of November 21st, 2024. Georgia, will you please call the roll for attendance?
Yes, Councillor Nolan,
Good morning.
Councillor Rosenthal,
Good morning.
Councillor Simpson,
Present. Good morning.
Councillor Lewis,
Present.
Councillor Wong,
Present.
Councillor Gonzalez is excused, and Council President Peterson.
Present. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to public communications on non-agenda items. Georgia, will you please describe the audience or procedures for public communication portion of the meeting?
Yes, if anyone wishes to testify on non-agenda items, now is the time to do so. Public testimony will be limited to 3 minutes. I will manage the timer to go off at the 3-minute mark. If you have not already signed up to speak, you can do so now. If you are joining us on Zoom, you can sign up to testify by raising your hand on Zoom. Depending on your version of Zoom, the raise hand function has its own tab or is located within the reactions tab. Those calling in can raise their hands by dialing *9. If you are joining us in person, you can sign up by filling out one of the blue cards in the back of the room and bringing it up to me. For those joining us on Zoom, I will promote you to a full panelist when it is your turn to testify. I will call on your name or phone number when it is your turn to testify, and a window will appear asking you to accept being promoted to a panelist. Once you click accept, your Zoom window will close for just a brief moment before you rejoin as a panelist, where you will be able to turn on your camera if you like. As a reminder, you do not need to give your physical address. However, please introduce yourself for the record before testifying. And Council President Peterson, we have 3 people signed up to testify. And if you signed up to testify on Resolution 5442, we are going to have a separate public comment period for that, just so everyone knows that signed up for that. The first person that we have to testify is Peter Clem, and you can come and sit at whichever one you'd like, and your time will start when you begin speaking.
Thank you. Council President and members of the council, for the record, my name is Peter Clem. I live in North Portland and am a resident of District 5. I'm here to support the Expo Future project, specifically the proposals including 2 sheets of ice. The metro area is an ice desert. The few rinks in the area we have are old, they're in disrepair, and they're at capacity. This means that for any individual age group or skill level, you may only have one day and time option a week, and if that doesn't work for you, you can't play. My next door neighbor has a 7-year-old girl who was really getting into ice hockey, but when the rink changed the schedule, she had to give up the sport and now plays soccer exclusively. An ice facility is the exact type of project that is well suited for a regional government to take on. No one got rich from operating an ice rink. It's essentially a break-even or low-profit enterprise, but the community benefits are profound, both in terms of recreational opportunity and financially. Ice rinks are regional destinations. I coached youth hockey for a year despite not having any children myself, and we had players coming from Astoria and Corvallis every week just for 1 hour of ice time. I play in adult leagues with people from Hood River, from Ridgefield, from Salem. They all come to the few rinks in the area, and those players and their families spend money in the area. They go to dinner after games and before they leave town. And that's not to mention the economic benefits that tournaments have, both youth tournaments and adult tournaments. I've traveled to Seattle and to Las Vegas and to a few other places for adult tournaments, and they bring in people from all over the country who spend their money, who stay in our hotels, who provide tax revenue to Metro and to other jurisdictions in the region. So I'm excited for Expo Future. I think the location is perfect. I think it'll be a good use of the exposition center. It's right on the Max line and I-5, and I urge this council to move forward with the project. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Next up, we have Conrad Loda. I would probably sit at the other one because that one sounded a little weird. Yeah, thank you.
Sounds good.
Morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Council President, members of the council. For the record, my name is Conrad Loda. I'm here to show my support for the Expo Future project as well. I am a participant in recreational hockey in the area, and I also have a son who plays youth hockey for the Winterhawks travel program. I'd like to second some of the things that Peter had said as far as utilization of the rinks that we have here. They're just at their maximum, and people are being turned away because there's just not enough ice time to support programs. And also, there's programs that can't even get off the ground, and there's some limited time for people that want to learn how to skate. It's not just hockey; it's also figure skating, and there's other ice programs that don't even have a chance to exist because of the lack of time. Also, I'd like to say that the trend that I've been seeing is that as the youth do improve in the sport, the trend is that people leave the state right now because we don't have the resources to support them. So they'll go to the Midwest, to Colorado, to Canada in order to help foster their interests. We also, from the youth program, we're spending as families tremendous amount of resources in travel to go to tournaments, to find other competition because we don't have it here in the state. And so that's monies and dollars and time spent outside of our home here that if we had more rinks, we could reverse that trend. And additionally to that, not only would it be for the families that live here, but Portland would start to become a destination for the sport rather than an exit, which it currently is. I'm also here to represent a new nonprofit here called the Oregon Rinks Initiative. The primary mission is to see that we get more ice in the state of Oregon. So particular interest in this project and finding a way to support, putting our resources towards the project and supporting Metro however we can. So I'm excited for the opportunity. I also think it's a great location. I think 2 sheets of ice provides the maximum utility for that project, and want to help see it through. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you.
All right. Next, we have David Brunton.
Good morning, Council President and members of the Council. For the record, my name is David Bruno, and I'm here to provide some feedback in support of the Expo Future project. So first and foremost, this new venue would be a powerful catalyst for social cohesion in a diverse and dynamic community like ours. Such a facility serves as a melting pot where people from all walks of life can come together, whether it's youth leagues, amateur tournaments, or community events. A multi-sport venue fosters a sense of unity, belonging, and shared identity. It provides a space for families, friends, and neighbors to connect, engage, and celebrate the spirit of sportsmanship. The positive impact on youth in particular can't be overstated, offering them a safe and encouraging environment to learn, grow, and thrive. Moreover, the economic advantages are significant and far-reaching from a facility such as the Expo Future project. A multi-sport venue attracts visitors, athletes, and fans from both near and far, driving foot traffic to local businesses and boosting our economy. Restaurants, hotels, retail shops, and service providers will all experience increased patronage, leading to job creation and greater economic stability. And the influx of visitors also means enhanced tourism prospects, and our urban center can become a destination for regional and even national sporting events. And in addition, our community lacks sufficient ice rink facilities in particular to support the growing demand of figure skating, ice hockey, and other recreational activities. And by incorporating 2 rinks into the multi-sport venue, we will address the critical need. These rinks will not only provide necessary space for local leagues, teams, and enthusiasts, but also attract regional competitions and events. The availability of high-quality ice rink facilities will also promote the development of local talent, offering more opportunities for aspiring athletes to train and compete. Furthermore, such a venue can serve as a hub for community programs and initiatives promoting health and wellness. Regular physical activity is essential for maintaining a healthy lifestyle, and a multi-sport facility offers accessible opportunities for exercise and recreation for people of all ages. This not only improves physical health, but also mental well-being, reducing healthcare costs and enhancing the quality of life for all residents. So in conclusion, the establishment of a multi-sport venue near our urban center is more than just an investment in infrastructure, it's an investment in our community's future. It brings people together, boosts the local economy, addresses a critical need for ice rink facilities, promotes health and wellness, and fosters a vibrant, connected community. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that concludes the folks that have signed up for non-agenda items.
Awesome. Seeing no one coming forward and no one else online, I will close testimony on non-agenda items and move on to the consent agenda. Councilors, we have 6 items on today's consent agenda. Consideration of the September 19th, October 10th, October 31st council meeting minutes. Resolution number 24-5433 for the purpose of authorizing the Chief Operating Officer to issue an amended non-system license to Core Disposal, LLC, for the transport of commercial food waste mixed with compostable serviceware to the Ann & Brother Inc. compost facility located in Marion County, Oregon. Resolution number 24-5428 for the purpose of amending and adopting the list of designated facilities of the solid waste system pursuant to Metro Code Chapter 5.05. And resolution number 24-5439 for the purpose of confirming members of the Regional Waste Advisory Committee. Do I have a motion for the consent agenda?
I'll move consent agenda.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Councilor Lewis and seconded by Councilor Simpson. Any further discussion? All right. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you. We'll move on to resolution. We have 2 items today. Resolution number 24-5442 for the purpose of awarding 2040 planning and development grants. Earlier this year, Metro Council adopted changes to the 2040 planning and development grant program to allow for a quarterly application cycle intended to provide applicants with more opportunities to work with program staff to develop strong applications that advance Metro's regional vision for growth. The first quarterly grant cycle launched in June of this year, and the 2040 Grant Screening Committee evaluated the applications and submitted them to our Chief Operating Officer for consideration. Today, we have the opportunity to approve those recommended grants. We have staff here, 2040 Grants Program Manager Sarah Breakstone and Community Investment Manager Hal Hagedorn here to present, and we have 2 folks that are here for invited testimony after you make a presentation. Thank you.
Great. Okay. Great. So while the PowerPoint is warming up, I just wanted to introduce myself. Hi, I'm Hal Hagedorn. I use she/her pronouns. I manage the community investment team. The team oversees several programs, including equitable development strategies, economic development, brownfields, and the community placemaking program. So last month, the 2040 program moved to the community investment team so that the grant programs funded by the construction excise tax, the community placemaking, and 2040 grant programs are now under my team. And so this provides an opportunity to align the work and to find synergies among the various programs. So before I hand it over to Sarah to talk about this past cycle, I just wanted to, so next slide, please, set some context for everyone. I just want to remind folks that the refinements to the program were based on feedback from local governments, community partners, and other stakeholders. This is the first cycle that implements the program refinements approved by Council last year through amendments to the Metro Code, as well as the administrative rules. The refinements really focus on improving the program to streamline the process, to be more efficient and user-friendly. And it also recenters the program on the fundamental purpose of facilitating development and redevelopment, and emphasis on project readiness to move these plans to implementation. So this program is now on a quarterly schedule for the next, for 2025, and we will have 4 grant cycles in the upcoming year. So with that, I will turn it over to Sarah.
Good morning, counselors. I'm Sarah Breakstone. I'm a principal regional planner, and I manage the 2040 grant program. Next slide, please. Before we get into the grants, just a quick note about our process so far. We kicked off in May with a couple of open houses. We updated the grants handbook and application materials and made those available on our website. Early part of the summer, we accepted letters of interest and held meetings with potential applicants to help them through the process. Full applications were due December 6th, and they were reviewed by staff and evaluated by our grants screening committee, who then developed their recommendation, which was forwarded to our chief operating officer. Excuse me. We received 5 complete applications, and of those, 3 were recommended for funding before today. Something happened to the presentation?
Could we put the presentation back? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll get into a little bit more detail about the grant applications in a moment, but I did want to take a second to acknowledge our grants screening committee, and I'm hoping the slide can come up. There's a slide that lists the members of our screening committee. We'll show that in a minute. This is a group of volunteers who have agreed to evaluate applications and meet quarterly to develop their recommendations for funding. So it's not an insignificant amount of time that they are committing to this process. They are very thorough and thoughtful in their evaluations, and they really bring their diversity of lived and professional experiences to the process, which is a great value to us. So I just want to take a moment to acknowledge them and thank them for their continued time and commitment.
Sorry, working on some technical difficulties.
Do you want me to pause?
No, let's keep going.
Okay. Might need to pull up my slides. Let's see. Outcomes for this meeting. I'm going to highlight for you the 3 applications that are being recommended for funding today, and then we will be asking you to consider a vote on Resolution 24-5442. Passage of that resolution will authorize the funding for the grants and allow our COO to execute agreements with grantees. I'm pretty sure the next slide was going to show you a list of the grant applications that we received. There were 5 of them. Applications came in from Lake Oswego, Troutdale, Prosper Portland, Portland Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, and Albina Vision Trust. The total request from those 5 applications was about $2.6 million. As I said, 3 of those are being recommended for funding, and I will get into those in a moment. Yeah, thank you. 1 second.
The folks on Zoom can see it, just
okay.
so you know. Yeah, sorry about that. We're working on it.
The 3 applications that are being recommended for funding today are Lake Oswego, Troutdale, and the Albina Vision Trust work. The total funding being recommended for today is about $1.56 million. The applications from Prosper Portland and Portland BPS that were not recommended for funding at this time have the opportunity, those applicants have the opportunity to request feedback, which they have actually both already done, and work with staff to improve their application and resubmit in a future cycle if they choose to do so. And our next cycle is coming right up. Sorry. It's throwing me off.
You're doing great. You're doing great.
So the Lake Oswego request is for funding to do a pretty complete overhaul of the Foothills District Framework Plan, which was adopted in 2012 by the city. Since that time, there have been some pretty significant changes to the conditions of that site. A couple more forward, please. In addition to shifting council priorities, they have a new housing needs analysis and a new housing production strategy that I believe was adopted just earlier this year. So they would like to create a new framework plan for the Foothills District that will reflect current conditions and also include comprehensive plan and zoning code amendments and implementation strategies. They are requesting $745,000 to do this work. Next slide, please. Maybe I'll leave this open just in case. The city of Troutdale has requested funding to do a zoning code audit and zoning code amendments intended to reduce barriers to housing development and economic development along the Halsey corridor, specifically along the main streets on Halsey. This is a continuation of previous work that was funded through a 2040 grant in collaboration with the cities of Wood Village and Fairview. Troutdale at the time was not able to complete the work, and so they are requesting this funding so that they can finish out the work and adopt some code amendments that work for them. And they are asking for $65,000 to do this work. Next slide, please. Albina Vision Trust is requesting funding to develop a master plan for redevelopment of the former Portland Public Schools headquarters site in the lower Albina neighborhood. Their plan for this site, which is now under their control, includes about 1,000 housing units, community hubs, commercial spaces, parks, and other neighborhood amenities. And again, this is a continuation of work that has been funded under two prior 2040 grants. They are requesting $750,000 for this work. Next slide. So coming up, we'll be asking you to consider a vote on Resolution 24-5442. With passage of that resolution, we can finalize intergovernmental agreements with grantees and work can begin. We're hopeful that work can start early part of 2025. Again, applicants who were not successful in this round have the opportunity to work with staff to strengthen their applications and resubmit in subsequent cycles. And the next batch of grants will be the first quarter cycle for 2025, and those will be coming to you in March. Next slide. Any questions?
Councilors, any questions?
Let's test. Oh, it seems to be fixed.
Okay, thank you. Councilors, any questions for staff? Councilor Rosenthal and then Juan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question. Will the grants awarded particularly for the Albina Trust and the Gresham, will that be sufficient to allow them to finish it? And what is their time frame? Is it like a 2-year process to complete those processes?
I'm sorry, did you mean Troutdale?
No, I didn't mean Troutdale. I meant Albina Vision Trust and Lake Oswego, which are the large grants. I assume the Troutdale one looks like it's about a year process.
Yeah, sorry. Lake Oswego is requesting the full amount of funding that they developed a very detailed scope and budget. So they seem pretty confident that the budget that they've identified is sufficient to complete the work. And they are anticipating, I believe, 2 years, maybe 18 to 24 months to do the work. Albina Vision Trust, the funding that they have requested is not the full amount of funding that they are saying is going to be required to master plan the PPS site, but this is the amount that they are requesting from Metro, and they're getting other funding from different sources to fill out the grant or to fill out the work. And I believe they are also looking at about 18 to 24 months.
Thank you.
All right, Councilor Wong.
Thank you, Madam President. For the two proposals that aren't being advanced this round, I see that they're for like a retail character plan and a light manufacturing plan. And the screening committee said that they don't align with the goals of a program. I just wanted to clarify, the goal of a program is for planning processes for future development. Is that correct? And less on like an economic development plan for manufacturing or retail. I guess what elements didn't align with the program goals?
Sure. So the Prosper Portland project, which was the Soul District plan,
The screening committee felt that application didn't adequately demonstrate the link to development and redevelopment in the district. It was their understanding that it was more about like tenant improvements and things sort of interior to buildings. They also felt that the project readiness criteria, which includes a number of factors, that they didn't fully demonstrate that the project was ready to go. The scope was high level, didn't provide sufficient detail, didn't clearly identify for them Prosper's role in the work and the strategies and tools that Prosper would use to implement the plan that comes out of this effort. So those were their primary concerns. And then the Made in Old Town project, I couldn't quite hear if you were asking about that one as well, or were you?
Yeah, just they were both, it seemed to me like focused on economic development goals and less on planning.
And for that one, it was similar concerns. So needed a more detailed scope, and then also clarifying the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability's role and how they will actually take the plan and implement it. Those things were not clear in the proposal.
Okay. And, I think both, do support kind of under-resourced communities. And I'm hoping the staff is working, with the applicants to refine proposals. Okay.
Yeah, we've met with both of them to give them the feedback from the screening committee and help them understand how they can better demonstrate consistency with the grant criteria. And my understanding is that they are both planning to resubmit, and we'll continue to work with us, with Metro staff, to make sure that they are developing strong applications.
Great. Thank you for your work.
Any further questions for staff? Seeing none, just go ahead and stay there just in case. But I'll invite up Wintat Johannes from Albina Vision Trust that is here today to just speak to their proposal. Thank you.
Thanks.
And I believe we have one more person online that would like to provide testimony. Sam Diaz from 1000 Friends of Oregon. So we'll get to that next.
Okay. Well, good morning, counselors. For the record, my name is Winta Johannes. I'm the executive director of the Albina. Can you hear me? Okay. Of the Albina Vision Trust. I'm pleased to join you this morning simply to express our gratitude for your steadfast support. You see, it is under your tenure, President Peterson, and with the leadership of this council, that the Albina Vision Trust has grown from a glimmer of hope to now the nation's largest redevelopment project. We know that the legacy of Albina is both tactile and spiritual, that our organization was born under the weight of 5 decades of government betrayal, as well as 5 decades of community vision for freedom dreams. As we have leaned into the transformative power of planning and development, it is our Metro regional government that has been by our side, shoulder to shoulder, since day one. As you consider the Metro 2040 grant resolution this morning, I want to be sure that you understand the significance of this specific grant program in the development of our work. The Community Investment Plan, funded in 2019, allowed us to turn high-level values into a roadmap for district development. This plan has been internationally recognized for excellence in urban planning, design, and community engagement. It's enabled us to bring more than $600 million in new investments to Lower Albina, with the first families moving into the district in 4 decades just next summer. The Phase 2 work that you supported helped us to better understand the Portland Public School District's relocation needs. With Metro brokering the relationship, it also laid the foundation for the partnership with Portland Public Schools, which resulted in an agreement earlier this year that the school district would work with Albina Vision Trust to find new sites for relocation within a year. Shortly after, the state of Oregon contributed $25 million to Albina Vision Trust to help support our acquisition of the site. So the planning grant before you represents the final crucial step so that we can go through the City of Portland's Central City Master Plan requirements in strong partnership with the city. And as you can see from our past 2 cycles, each time you make the decision to fund this work, you are also enabling a stronger network of partnerships because as we know, none of these regional promises move forward alone. When we first started this work together, no one would have told you that this milestone, pursuing the Central City Master Plan for the Portland Public School site, would have been possible in just 5 short years. And yet, you believed. More importantly, you acted, and you have remained committed, as has your world-class staff team, who have been incredible collaborators to us over the years. So today I come here simply to thank you for your courage, for your stewardship of a sacred promise, not to what this region has been, but to what it can and will be. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe we have Sam Diaz from 1000 Friends online.
Yes, next up for testimony on agenda item resolution number 24-5442 is Sam Diaz. If you have not already signed up to speak, you can do so now by coming up to the front of the room or raising your hand on Zoom. Sam, I'm going to promote you.
Actually,
now.
we're just doing invited testimony right now.
So, understood. Never
yeah.
mind. Remove that from your head.
You.
Sam, I'll promote you to a panelist now.
Sorry, President Peterson, should I go now or do I wait?
Yes, please. In relation to the 2040 grant?
Correct.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Good morning, President Peterson, Council. My name is Sam Diaz, Executive Director at 1000 Friends of Oregon. We enthusiastically support this proposed planning grant to Albina Vision Trust for $750,000. We need some good news lately, so just very, very grateful to be able to testify, be able to see this move forward. Of note, we see this planning grant helping the region make progress towards Metro's 6 desired shared outcomes. It makes substantial progress for the City of Portland and Metro to meet the housing production goals. When we think about over 1,100 homes slated for just the Portland Public School site alone. And it helps this region meet its climate smart strategy goals by locating housing as part of a bigger vision for a transformed, inclusive, vibrant neighborhood. A mentor of mine who helped us manage grant selection across state agencies would always start kickoff meetings saying, these grant programs are only as good as the grant applications that come in. Well, we should all consider ourselves very lucky and fortunate to be able to support this grant application from Albina Vision Trust. We should do everything we can to remove barriers and bring resources to help support community leaders who are bringing transformative visions like this forward. Thank you to Winta, to the team at Albina Vision Trust. Thank you to Metro for playing this critical role of redefining the role of government and taking the journey to rebuild trust in our public institutions.
Thank you. All right. Councilors, any further discussion is there a motion for resolution 24-5442?
I move it.
Second.
There it was moved by Councilor Lewis and seconded by who took it?
I did take it. Oh, he did. Yeah.
Councilor Simpson. Any further discussion?
Can I just say one thing? First of all, thank you, staff, for your, continued work on this and engagement. I think that what Winter has said is something that isn't talked about enough, and that's the trust that you all build with community when you do these kind of projects. So thank you. And thank you to Winter. We've been working on this and many projects in the region for some time. And it's without your leadership, your fastness that we're here. So thank you, and let's keep pushing.
Awesome. Any other comments? Councilor Lewis.
Sure, thank you. I want to speak not only to what we heard about this morning, but also to the process that got us here with this more rapid cycle and just-in-time funding availability feels like a change And if we are actively going to do this work in the UGB and not just the longer term outside the UGB, we need to stay on this quick cycle. So thank you to the applicants who are here today with wonderful projects. Some we heard from, at least one we didn't hear from. Cheering for those projects moving forward, but also for our staff being really responsive to the need. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Rosenthal.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, it's a positive note. First of all, I very much support the Albina Vision Trust. This is a great redevelopment. They put a lot of work in, and I'm glad that we can support it. I also want a positive note that for the core of the city, there are 3 redevelopment projects that are ongoing, and I think they all speak to the fact that Portland is moving forward rather than getting stuck in some of the problems that it had. There's the OMSI development project, and there's also the Montgomery Park development project. All of these will aid and enhance to the viability of the downtown area, and I think it's great.
Anybody else? I just want to say thank you to staff as well. Thank you for rolling through just the presentation this morning and your flexibility in that, because we do have a long agenda, and I wanted to make sure we got that through everything today. And thank you to the applicants. And I think trying to work with the projects that didn't get funded, their proposals to see what we can be a part of is a great next step. But this is a fund for development to actually be able to create community. And so how we use that is pretty specific to meet those 2040 goal concepts. So I think I appreciate the difficulty because there are a lot of needs out there, and appreciate the work that goes into the selection with the selection committee. But thank you to the Albina Vision Trust team that's here, including Winta. Thank you for your partnership and being very clear about goals and very clear about what you are working to achieve, the outcomes that makes it so much easier to be able to do that. And there's so many needs that you are also trying to meet, and so it's hard to get that clarity, but you have managed to do that, and I very much appreciate that. And it has reaped benefits in ways that we didn't even think that we would ever see in this short a time frame. So congratulations, and we look forward to the next steps with you and the rest of our partners here. So thank you. All right, Council. Georgia, will you please call the roll?
Absolutely. Councillor Simpson.
Aye.
Councillor Lewis.
Aye.
Councillor Wong.
Aye.
Councillor Rosenthal.
Aye.
Councillor Nolan.
Yes.
And Council President Peterson.
Aye. The motion passes. Thank you. Congratulations, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. We will move on to resolution number 24-5430 for the purpose of amending the fiscal year 2024 through 25 budget and appropriation schedule and fiscal year 2024 and 25 through fiscal year 2028 through 29 capital improvement plan to provide for changes in operations. Councilors, we will now consider the proposed changes. We have both our financial planning director, Cinnamon Williams, and our chief financial officer, Brian Kennedy. Oh, no, we don't have Cinnamon. Good morning. Welcome.
Thank you, Council President Peterson, members of the council. My name is Brian Kennedy, Chief Financial Officer for Metro. Use he, him pronouns. I am in for Cinnamon Williams today, who is unable to be here. Before we start, I want to take a moment and introduce you all to Amanda Akers, our new budget manager. She joined us a few months ago. You will be seeing much more of her as we move into the budget process, and she will be talking with you a little bit later in the presentation.
Well, welcome. Thank you.
So if we could pull the presentation up. Thank you. Next slide, please. There are really three separate pieces of action in this resolution today. So the first category in budget amendments, these are fund appropriation changes where we're asking council to approve the appropriation authority in several Metro funds. There are also some changes to authorized positions, authorized full-time equivalent positions, and then finally changes to the capital improvement plan. So we'll be going through all of those briefly. Next slide, please. So in terms of budget amendments, the total appropriation appropriation increase across all funds is 9.7 million, and there's a net increase in 8.5 FTE requested. Next slide, please. So going through the fund by fund, in the general fund, the net change is only an increase of $32,000, a little over almost $33,000. Much of the spending is coming from contingency. We have details on these changes coming next. Next slide, please. So in the general fund, there are several different actions. There is increased funding for planning and development related to the Future Vision 2040 project, as well as some additional MPO grant funding coming through ODOT. In the Capital Asset Management Department, there is implementation of Budget Note number 1 relating to additional investments in climate justice and resilience, investments in the HVAC system for the Metro Regional Center, and an update to Metro's sustainability plan. And then we have offsetting reductions to our general fund contingency as part of those changes. Next slide, please. In the General Asset Management Fund, we have a change for the MRC Plaza project and Stormwater project. There are no overall appropriation. I guess there is an appropriation change of $2 million reflecting the final cost for the Plaza project and additional work for the Stormwater project. Next slide, please. In the Parks and Nature Operating Fund, two relatively small changes. One, there was an error in the current year budget at adoption relating to variable hour staffing, so there's an increase to their budget reflecting that cost that should have been included in the budget, as well as some additional investments at the Glendevere Golf Course that we are obligated to make. Total change to expenditures just under $700,000. Next slide, please. In the MERC Fund, the Venues Fund, the changes here are just just under $1 million increase in expenditures, primarily related to recognizing the full cost of the Arlene Schnitzer Concert Hall roof and drain plan, and then also recognizing a $1 million investment from the City of Portland in that project. Next slide, please. Moving on to the zoo, we have actually three different funds here. The Zoo Asset Management Fund, where they do a lot of their capital projects, their main operating fund, as well as the new Zoo Bond Fund that was created after the passage of the Zoo Bond in May. Some relatively small increases in the Zoo Asset Management and Capital Fund, basically related to operational changes that are necessary. The significant investments are in the Zoo Bond Fund, where we are recognizing bond sale proceeds that will happen later this fiscal year, and also addition of staff and investments in some of the first Zoo Bond projects. So this is action that is necessary for the Zoo Bond team to begin their work. Next slide, please. Went through this. Next slide, please. In the Solid Waste Fund, two categories of changes here. There is some additional program support related to implementing the new Regional Waste Advisory Committee, and then there's also some significant changes on their capital budget, which is the bulk of this appropriation change. They had some additional fund balance beyond what was expected, so they're reprioritizing some capital projects, and we need to appropriate funds for them to execute those projects. Next slide, please.
So this is covered a little bit before in the appropriations, but we are adding 8.5 FTE to the overall, one of which is in planning, development, and research, increasing to support the future visioning of 2040. And then waste prevention and environmental services, adding 1.0 FTE to coordinate the Regional Waste Advisory Committee. And then the bulk of the FTE increases is in the Oregon Zoo, 4 directly related to the Zoo Bond, 1.5 related to animal care in the operating, and then 1.0 that is grant funded for condor care. Next slide, please. So this graphical representation shows that the increases that we're making in appropriations and FTE are very minor in comparison to what we had originally adopted. In the first graph, we're showing that we had $1.9 billion that we had in appropriations, and then less than 0.5% increase is what we are requesting for adoption today. In the next graph, it's showing that for FTE, 8.5 increases from the original 1,170.3 that were adopted previously. Thank you. Now we can go on to the CIP. Next slide, please.
Overall, in the changes to the capital improvement plan, it's a $13.5 million change, and we will run through each of these individually. Next slide, please. So, starting with Merck, $1 million increase in the CIP. There's a number of reprioritized projects for the Oregon Convention Center. Again, no budget appropriation change, but they're moving projects around based on business need. And then again, we're updating the CIP to recognize the full cost of the Arlington Concert Hall roof and drain project, as well as that $1 million contribution from the city of Portland. In Parks and Nature, there's a $500,000 decrease in the CIP, again, adjusting the CIP for prioritization. So some projects were pushed off, but then they also added 2 new projects for the Glendiver Golf Course. And then in the Capital Asset Management Department, we have a $2.5 million increase. We reprioritized 4 projects, including some new or additional investments in the Plaza and MRC Plaza parking area and stormwater, as well as projects that were added in response to that budget note for climate resilience and climate justice. Those projects that we're prioritizing right now are related to purchasing and installing electric vehicle infrastructure and continuing replacement of internal combustion engine vehicles in our fleet. Next slide, please. In WPES, $3.6 million increase related to project prioritization. So basically pulling projects that were further out in the CIP into the current year in order to complete them. And then in the zoo, $6.9 million increase primarily related to adding 2 projects that were specified in the zoo bond. And then they also had some projects reprioritized and one added in response to that budget note for climate resilience. Next slide, please. Next steps, there is a public hearing. This is a supplemental budget required because of the size of changes mostly related to the zoo bond, recognizing those bond proceeds and that additional investment. And then your consideration on the resolution. And with that, Amanda and I are happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Councilors, any questions for staff on this proposed amendment? Councilor Wong, and then Councilor Lewis.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you for bringing these proposed amendments before us. And I like getting grants for the agency, and I saw, some of these changes included additional support from the Energy Trust of Oregon for the MRC HVAC, and then for the Schnitz, there's $1 million from the Portland Clean Energy Fund. And I'm wondering if you could talk about how the finance team identifies and goes after supporting funding sources, and like how you think through that and leverage other funding sources that are available. And I do see for things like the EV infrastructure. Like I know there's different programs from PGE or the state that support that. So why are we getting grants for some of these initiatives and not for others? Is it just we didn't get them? Did we apply? Like just wondering how you think through bring as many resources to these challenges as possible.
Councilor Wong, that's a great question. And in a lot of cases, it's not the finance staff who are directing that work. It's department programmatic staff and capital asset management. Their sustainability team is actively monitoring a lot of those grant programs and pursuing the ones that align best with our with the projects we have. Our role in finance in a lot of cases is to make sure that we are not taking on additional administrative responsibilities or unknown costs as related to that grant. In terms of the electric vehicle infrastructure, part of that strategy is explicitly designed around making investments that can leverage federal Inflation Reduction Act expenditures. So while we're not receiving that grant revenue now, we're trying to structure that program in a way that we will be eligible to receive those dollars on the back end and leverage future investments in clean energy. So our program staff do a great job looking for additional revenue for these projects. It's just they don't always line up with our internal prioritization of when those projects need to happen.
Okay, thank you. I just don't want to leave money on the table. Thanks.
Councilor Lewis and then Rosenthal.
Sure, thank you. First, I want to say this is super exciting. Not normal to have the 8 attachment items be as exciting as they are for the purposes of today, celebrating not only the work that we're able to do to take care of our assets, but in particular the implementation of the budget note that's really looking at the things we can prioritize as a cluster to bring up our climate resilience, and in particular things that are timely if we're going to get the direct pay. So thank you to Jenna and thank you to Ryan for working on that, and thank you to your team for incorporating that into this larger budget package. I think that's more elegant than the standalone that I had originally proposed. So big thanks to you and to the team. My question though is when it comes to the Arlene Schnitzer Concert Hall roof, $7 million total project cost at this point, another $1 million contribution from the city from a different fund. Where are we in terms of city fund to total cost expenditure on that project?
Councilor Lewis, I don't know the answer to that question off the top of my head, but I think Craig was in the audience earlier, or Ashley might know the answer.
And
if not, we can run it down for you.
I believe that $1 million contribution is the extent of their contribution to that project.
Wow,
I'm getting a nod.
That's a shock. Thank you.
Councilor Rosenthal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one quick question on looking through the background materials not presented in your slides. Good presentation, incidentally. I noticed that there was a $75 million increase to the budget allocation overall, particularly related to the zoo. Does that represent the amount of bonds that are expected to be? Because the overall bond issue authorized was much more. 75 million. What is projected to be sold during this next session?
Councilor Rosenthal, yes. Our expectation is that we'll issue around $75 million in bonds. We'll be issuing tax-exempt bonds, and under rules put in place by the IRS, for tax-exempt bonds, you have to have a reasonable expectation that you can spend 85% within 3 years. So we try to size those bond sales around the capital plans of the departments to make sure that we comply with that 85% rule. So our current estimate right now is 75 million is pretty reasonable for that first 3 years, but we do very careful cash flow monitoring with the departments, and if they need more cash sooner, if projects move faster, we can accelerate and do another bond sale if necessary.
Thank you for I wasn't aware of the 3-year limitation, but thank you.
Okay. Do we have any other questions for staff? All right, thank you.
Thank you
so much, and welcome. Thank you. We will now open a public hearing on resolution number 24-5430. Georgia, will you please describe to the audience the procedures for public hearings?
If anyone wishes to testify on resolution number 24-5430, now is the time to do so. Public testimony will be limited to 3 minutes. I will manage the timer to go off at the 3-minute mark. If you have not already signed up to speak, you can do so now. If you are joining us on Zoom, you can sign up to testify by raising your hand on Zoom. Depending on your version of Zoom, Depending on your version of Zoom, the raise hand function has its own tab or is located within the reactions tab. Those calling in can raise their hands by dialing *9. If you are joining us in person, you can sign up by filling out one of the blue cards in the back of the room and bringing it up to me. For those joining us on Zoom, I will promote you to a panelist when it is your turn to testify. I will call in your name or phone number when it is your turn to testify, and a window will appear asking you to accept being promoted to a panelist. Once you click accept, your Zoom window will close for just a brief moment before you rejoin as a panelist, where you will be able to turn on your camera if you like. As a reminder, you do not need to give your physical address. However, please introduce yourself for the record before testifying. And Council President Peterson, I have not received any folks that want to testify in advance, and I do not see any hands up in the Zoom box.
Okay. Thank you. Seeing no one rushing forward and nobody on Zoom, I will close the public hearing on resolution number 24-5430 and call for a motion.
I would move 24-5430.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved by Councillor Lewis and seconded by Councillor Simpson. Councillors, any further discussion? Seeing none, Georgia, will you please call the roll?
Yes. Councillor Nolan.
Yes.
Councillor Rosenthal.
Yes.
Councillor Wong.
Aye.
Councillor Lewis.
Aye.
And Councillor Simpson.
Aye.
And Council President Peterson.
Aye, the motion passes. Thank you. All right, we are going to move on to Ordinance 24-15-20 for the purpose of expanding the urban growth boundary to provide capacity for housing and employment to the year 2044 and amending the Metro Code to conform. Councilors, in accordance with the state requirement that Metro Council determine whether the urban growth boundary has adequate land for expected housing and job growth, we today have a first reading and public hearing on the proposed 2024 Urban Growth Report. Over the course of the year, we have considered one proposal from the City of Sherwood, including relevant data, public comment, and recommendations from our Chief Operating Officer, the Metro Policy Advisory Committee, and the Committee on Racial Equity. Last month, this council directed staff to develop an ordinance for our consideration consistent with the COO recommendation. Here today to present that ordinance, we have Catherine Tarlow, our Planning Development and Research Director, Ted Reed, Principal Regional Planner, and Roger Alfred, our Legal Counsel on this. Before we move into questions after the staff presentation, we will have a conversation. Go ahead. Thank you. Go for it.
And if the folks in the back could please put up the presentation, that would be wonderful.
Thank you. Oh, sorry. And just a heads up while we're waiting for that, I have to make another presentation in the middle of all of this. So I apologize to everybody in the audience. I will come back as quickly as I possibly can after I make that presentation to our mayors. That's something completely different. So apologies, but I feel bad missing testimony, but I probably will miss some of the testimony. And Councillor Wong, our Deputy Council President, will take over at that time. Just an FYI. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you, President Peterson and councilors. Do we have the presentation?
It should be coming up any minute.
All right, I'll give it just a minute and I can proceed without if need be. Great, thank you. As President Peterson said, this is a hearing on Ordinance 24-15-20, which is an ordinance to decide whether to bring the Sherwood West concept area into the urban growth boundary. Next slide, please. Just a quick summary of where we are in the process. Today's meeting is the first reading and a public hearing on this ordinance. The record closes on November 28th, which is the last day to submit any final written materials, including public comment. And the second reading and vote is scheduled for December 5th. Next slide, please. The overall process has gone on for nearly 2 years. We've been in front of you a number of times and had a lot of contact with folks about the proposal in front of you. Just as background, under Oregon state law, the Portland Metro region must have enough land inside our urban growth boundary to provide for the next 20 years of growth, as you know. As part of that requirement, at least every 6 years, this council looks at growth forecasts and development trends and decides whether to expand the boundary to meet this 20-year obligation. Since late 2022, our UGB team has analyzed topics like housing supply and employment need, and that work informed the Urban Growth Report, which was released earlier this summer. Meanwhile, in April of this year, we received the Sherwood West expansion proposal from the City of Sherwood. Then in August, Chief Operating Officer Madrigal provided a staff recommendation to move forward with expanding the UGB to include the Sherwood West area. That recommendation was based on the information in the Urban Growth Report, and it responds to the identified need for additional land for housing and industrial development in the region. As part of that recommendation, Chief Operating Officer Madrigal also suggested that the council include specific conditions of approval to ensure that a proposed expansion responds to regional needs and values. And you will see some of that condition, some of the information about those conditions and the requests of staff in today's ordinance. Next slide, please. This is the project timeline. You've seen it before. I'm not going to dive into the details here. I did, however, just want to highlight that in dark blue is a list of the data and analysis that has been shared with community members, stakeholders, jurisdictional partners throughout the process. As in previous UGB decisions, we looked at topics like housing need, population growth, and employment trends, and we did an inventory of buildable land in the region. New this year, in addition, was what we call a pro forma analysis of housing development potential, which looks at the likelihood of that development. And we conducted racial equity analysis in several areas, including looking at race, ethnicity, and disability status as part of the regional forecast, looking at trends relating to displacement and homelessness, and analyzing equity outcomes of 2 past UGB expansion areas. That said, we know there's more to do. We know that new analysis will be needed as we move past this specific expansion proposal, and we have been working with Council President Peterson and others on a council work session in January where you all can talk as a group about lessons learned and give the UGB team direction for future growth management work. Next slide, please. I did want to touch on how the decision has engaged partners and the public. At your direction, staff convened a roundtable of community members with varied interests to examine UGB assumptions and open the black box. The process also included monthly touch points with Metro's Policy Advisory Committee, MPAC, and the technical work group that supports it, MTAC. And we convened a first ever UGB youth cohort made up of young people from around the region to give feedback on the UGB process and desired outcomes. Finally, we engaged with Metro's Committee on Racial Equity, or CORE. Again, we know there's more to do on that front. That more will include work related to the Sherwood proposal specifically, and more generally to make sure the urban growth management process addresses racial equity. Next slide, please. That brings me again to the council work session proposed for January that I mentioned a couple of minutes ago. Over the course of the fall, we've held several work sessions with you and a number of public meetings that focused on how the Sherwood West expansion proposal meets regional housing and industrial needs, and discussing accountability and council conditions of approval. Early next year, you will have an opportunity to debrief the process and talk about what comes next in the areas listed on this slide. So process overview and engagement, economic and demographic trends, the draft regional forecast, preliminary residential capacity, the concept planning process itself, which will be closely engaged with Sherwood staff should you approve this ordinance, and any COO recommendations, or the COO recommendation, and then any conditions that are added as a part of that ordinance. We will also at that time have a chance to debrief the overall process and talk more about the Committee on Racial Equity core recommendations that are not specifically addressed by conditions in the ordinance. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ted Reed to talk more about the technical work and the recommendation in front of you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Council President Peterson, councilors. My name is Ted Reed. I'm Principal Regional Planner here at Metro. And as Catherine noted, I wanted to give a little bit of a reminder about some of the work we've done to get to this point. If we can move to the next slide, please. We, of course, have an urban growth boundary so that growth is intentional and so that we are thoughtful about how the region grows so that we can protect farms and forests and reinvest in our existing communities. And so a lot of the process that we go through to get to this point is looking at that question of whether there's a regional need to expand the urban growth boundaries so that it is a deliberate process. We go through a fair amount of analysis that Catherine described to inform your decision. And we make sure that we're talking to others outside this building when we do that work. So we have engaged a land use technical advisory group through this process that helped us look at our growth capacity on lands already in the boundary today. That group was comprised of local planning staff as well as private sector development experts. As Catherine noted, we introduced a new technique this time to understand likelihood of development over the next couple of decades using a pro forma tool that essentially looks at development potential from the perspective of a developer and what might be financially feasible. We also convened a panel of economists and demographers to take a look at our regional forecast to make sure that it seemed reasonable. As Catherine noted, we this time around also conducted a forecast that included details about race, ethnicity, and disability status. We have our standing Metro Technical Advisory Committee that's been involved throughout this process. And so that's what I want to emphasize is that we are here today after a couple of years of work engaging others to make sure that the analysis that we're providing has a basis in fact. Next slide, please. As noted earlier, this council gave us direction on October 8th at your work session based on all of the work we've done to date about what you would like to do. You directed staff that you wanted to adopt a final urban growth report. That's all of the assessment that I just mentioned about need for growth capacity. And in response to that finding of a need for growth capacity, you indicated that you wanted to amend the urban growth boundary to include the Sherwood West Urban Reserve Area. And that in doing so, you wanted to also have some conditions of approval that established the outcomes that you would like to see in that expansion area. And if we can move to the next slide. Those conditions, okay, so I'm jumping ahead. The ordinance in front of you does those three things. It adopts the urban growth report, expands the urban growth boundary, and adopts conditions of approval to get those outcomes that you've outlined for us. It takes 1,300 pages to do these things on this slide. So this is a simplification, of course. Next slide, please. The conditions of approval, and again, these are things that you have indicated you want the City of Sherwood to do in their subsequent planning process as they conduct the comprehensive planning for Sherwood West. You've established in these draft conditions of approval your expectation for the minimum number of homes and density you would like to expect, some conditions around housing affordability and how to encourage that in the City of Sherwood. Part of this expansion is to include some large industrial sites to accommodate the high-tech manufacturing sector. And you have indicated that you want to protect those sites for that purpose. So there are some conditions in here that seek to do that. And then going forward in Sherwood's planning process, you've also indicated your expectation that you want them to conduct broad-based community engagement, engaging people that have not traditionally been involved in these planning processes. And likewise, you would like to see the city conduct tribal consultation in their comprehensive planning process. Next slide, and I believe we go back to Catherine.
Back to me, just to summarize a little bit of the upcoming work. We have mentioned the council session proposed for early next year. We will also be reporting back to MPAC and MTAC. We'll be conducting some additional analysis with regional partners, including a hard look at how we analyze buildable land, industrial land, and we'll be doing an overall analysis and debrief of how the process unfolded this time with respect to some of the equity analysis that is crucially important to us as an organization. So look forward to that, and thank you again for your support through this process, for your guidance through this process, and for your direction. And thank you to staff for putting together the information that they've put together today.
Great, thank you. Roger?
Thank you. Good morning, President Peterson and council members. Roger Alfred, Office of Metro Attorney. I'm going to be unusually brief today and just hit a couple of quick legal points. Well, you've received a ton of testimony on this so far. It's a UGB decision, which means that there are lots of opinions. And we heard a lot of testimony. I think 40 people testified maybe back in September. There's been a constant stream of written materials that have come in since then, even more in the last 24 hours. And I'm sure we're going to hear some more testimony today. So I just want to hit like a couple of points that have been consistent and things that you've heard already, and that may also be presented in new materials and maybe today. One relates to an argument that's been made by the West Sherwood Farm Alliance pretty consistently about pointing to the fact that there are 200 vacant acres in the city of Sherwood, and with the suggestion that, well, why aren't we just developing those 200 vacant acres instead of expanding and adding all of this land to the UGB? A couple of things with that. The vacant acres are not the same as buildable acres. So when you actually look at that vacant land and apply the factors that we have to apply, such as considering right-of-way, environmental constraints, in some cases property ownership, that number is actually more like 80 acres. But the bigger point is that Metro's requirement is not just to look at buildable land need in the city of Sherwood. We have to look at the entire region. And so that 80 acres is part of Metro's analysis. Metro's analysis concluded that region-wide we have a need for something upwards of 3,000 units, which is obviously not going to be accommodated on 80 buildable acres. The second point I'm going to hit on is relates to the alternatives analysis. And there was a letter that came in a few days ago on that point. Really briefly, the alternatives analysis is a state law requirement that says that if Metro, or another city for that matter, decides that there is a need for more housing in the next 20 years, and then also decides that the way to resolve that need is going to be to expand the UGB, then Metro has to consider any other possible alternatives all the way around the region, in our case, all the other urban reserve areas, and make sure that the place we're deciding to expand is the best and right place to expand. So we have done that analysis. It's part of the record. It's extremely thorough. It's between 600 and 700 pages, depending on who you ask. The letter that you received from an attorney earlier this week on behalf of a Stafford area property owner suggests that our analysis is invalid, in part because we only selected Sherwood West as the best location for the sole reason that it has a concept plan. And I just want to make clear that that is not how that analysis works out. There are multiple different factors that are applied, and a lot of the other areas were rejected for reasons such as lack of access to public facilities and services, also size. Some of the urban reserve areas are just not big enough. So the existence of a concept plan is definitely one factor that weighs in favor of the city of Sherwood, but it's by no means the only factor that weighs in favor of the city of Sherwood. So that's just a quick description of how we got to that decision. And that's all I have, except that I would note the slide that was up previously mentioned an open record period staying open until November 28th. That is Thanksgiving. It's a week from today, which usually is what you do, 7 days. But I believe that what the council president is going to suggest is actually that the records stay open until November 27th, 5 p.m. So just clarification.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Thank you. Before I open up to questions from the council, I just wanted to acknowledge the meaningful comments that we've already gotten in, that we've received throughout the process. We know that this has been an imperfect process and that we can improve every time we go forward, and do lessons learned on community engagement as we plan for a collective future and as Metro grows as an organization. In light of the testimony we heard from Metro's Committee on Racial Equity, I shared with the council a formal response that demonstrates our commitment to and next steps for actively engaging CORE on our urban growth management policy in the months and years to come. In January, we will also, as our Director of Planning, Catherine Charlo, noted, we will hold at least one, possibly several work sessions to discuss the UGB process, lessons learned, and actions that require more analysis in the future. So following these discussions, I propose that the Council discuss a resolution that underscores our commitment to improving the UGB process and achieving our shared vision and values for future councils, because it will be another 6 years before we actually do this full process again, barring other factors. But I think getting it into the record and giving that advice, so to speak, of how to do this in the future would be a helpful next step. So I just want to place mark that so that we can just focus on this decision today. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Councilor Wong as Deputy Council President to open up the questions for council to staff and then hold a public hearing. And I will be back as soon as I can.
Great. Thank you, Madam President. Okay, well, I'll open it up for questions for staff or my colleagues. Councilor Rosenthal.
Yeah, I have actually have three questions. Two are technical regarding the current process, and one maybe we'll hold. It's regarding the January, the bookmark for the January one. The two regarding the current process. You talked about outreach, and there's a lot of stakeholders involved. My understanding is also that presentations were made. I mean, and all the cities in our region are also stakeholders. My understanding is that presentations were made to the Washington County Coordinating Council. I don't know if any presentations were made to the mayor's court, the mayor's consortium, or to the Clackamas Clackamas County Coordinating Council. And I just want to clarify whether those presentations were made, and I believe, I know from the WCCC they had a discussion of it. So I just want to clarify.
Yes, thank you, Councilor Rosenthal. We have been quite busy over the last 2 years engaging with the types of groups that you mentioned. I think over 100 of these kinds of engagements with groups like the Washington County Coordinating Committee, their corresponding staff group, the Clackamas County Coordinating Committee. We've been making the rounds consistently for some time now.
And then one other technical question on the process. It's my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, that the decision to do the baseline population projection is made independent of any considerations of the Sherwood proposal. But the Sherwood proposal approval is made dependent upon the independent conclusions of the baseline proposal, which says there is a need for land. In other words, it's a chicken and egg sort of thing, which comes first. Is that correct?
The determination about regional need comes first, and that's informed by the regional forecast that you mentioned. I can say that during the expert panel discussion of the regional forecast, there was no discussion about Sherwood West or other potential responses to any deficit in growth capacity. They were focused on, does this forecast make sense?
Yes. Okay.
Deputy Council President Wong and Councilor Rosenthal, one thing I might add to Ted's first answer, you asked about the Mayor's Consortium. And while we did not present to them, they actually expressed a preference that they have some representation on the roundtable that we conducted over the course of the last year. And so there were several members of that group at the roundtable. So looking at the detailed analysis as we went through it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Colleagues, any additional questions?
If nobody has it, I'll ask my other question going forward. In the conditions that are presented, there are new conditions. Well, one of the issues that was identified earlier was that when we requested concept plan, we didn't really have sideboards on exactly what the concept plan had to entail. So it appears that with the Sherwood situation, we're adding, and I think they're appropriate to add the regarding tribal consultation, requiring broad community investment stuff. These are recommendations from CORE. So I'm assuming that in January when we meet, we will be discussing perhaps some of the specifics of what a concept plan really should entail, because these sounds like general conditions that we might be adding that we haven't added in the past. Is that correct?
Councilor Rosenthal, in Metro's code, there is a title that does provide direction to cities that are completing concept plans. It covers a number of topics like how are you going to protect environmental resources, what kinds of housing are you planning for. I think what has happened in this decision process is there have been additional topics that have come up that are not adequately covered in those concept planning requirements. So that's the gist of the conversation that we think this council wants to have in the new year is what could we do better in terms of being clear about expectations for concept planning.
Yeah, so we could be discussing potential additions to the concept plan guidelines.
Yeah.
Okay.
Councilor Gonzalez, welcome.
Deputy President Wong, good morning, everyone. Just wanted to announce for the record that I'm here. Got to catch the tail end of the presentation from staff, and want to thank our team for, the commitment to engage folks and guide this council through this iteration of urban growth management process. And want to thank all the folks that have been able to submit testimony to us and help inform the direction of this process. And I think Metro has a major commitment to make, as President Peterson shared to our stakeholders about how this process can change and adapt. But specifically want to thank Ted and Catherine for their work. And again, just here a little bit late, but wanted to share some remarks.
Great, thank you. Ted, I'm wondering if you could also kind of highlight some of the details now that we're in the latest conditions of approval, particularly around community engagement and affordability.
Yes, Councilor Huang, I'm happy to do that. Around affordability, there are three main things that are proposed in the conditions of approval. The first is asking that the city look at the possibilities around new strategies and incentives to encourage the production of affordable housing. And then there's a list of possible strategies, including things like zoning changes, system development charge waivers, density bonuses, the sorts of actions that are typically considered by cities when they're thinking about how to encourage the production of affordable housing. The second piece has to do, and this is related, there are some new state laws now that require cities around the state to conduct what are called housing production strategies. And these are in response to housing targets that get set by the state. So the state is going to be setting a housing target for Sherwood and other cities in the new year. The city of Sherwood will then consider a housing production strategy. We're asking, as part of these conditions, that they do that work in coordination with Metro and Washington County to identify funding opportunities with the goal of meeting their housing production targets. And then lastly, we have a proposed condition that asks that the city in their comprehensive planning process look for opportunities within their existing town center to encourage regulated affordable housing. And also in the conditions of approval, there's a map attached that identifies 4 city-owned sites where the city is going to be looking at the possibilities there for affordable housing, including workforce housing for employees of nearby industries. You also asked about community engagement. This proposed condition, asks that the city, at the beginning of their comprehensive planning process, work with Metro to develop a public engagement plan that encourages broad-based, early and continuing opportunity for public involvement. And I won't read all the words, but the intent here is that that public engagement effort involve people who have been historically marginalized in these kinds of processes. So people of color, people with limited English proficiency, low-income groups, youth, older adults, those types of folks.
Thank you.
And Councilors, if I might add, just over assuming that you vote today to move this process forward over the coming years, our team will be working very closely with the Sherwood team on the comprehensive planning process. And these conditions that you have stated will be front and center in helping guide those conversations. So appreciate your clarity on that.
Great. Well, thank you for all your work on the conditions. Okay, seeing no other questions or comments, we'll open the public hearing on ordinance number 24-1520. Metro Council will hold one public hearing on this ordinance today. We will continue to accept written testimony until we close the record at 5 p.m. on November 27th, 2024. Georgia, will you please describe to the audience our procedures for the public hearing?
If anyone wishes to testify on ordinance number 24-1520, now is the time to do so. Public testimony will be limited to 3 minutes. I will manage a timer to go off at the 3-minute mark. If you have not already signed up to speak, you can do so now. If you are joining us on Zoom, you can sign up to testify by raising your hand on Zoom. Depending on your version of Zoom, the raise hand function has its own tab or is located within the reactions tab. Those calling in can raise their hands by dialing *9. If you are joining us in person, you can sign up by filling out one of the blue cards in the back of the room and bringing it up to me. For those joining us on Zoom, I will promote you to a full panelist when it is your turn to testify. I will call your name or phone number when it is your turn to testify, and a window will appear asking you to accept being promoted to a panelist. Once you click accept, your Zoom window will close for just a brief moment before you rejoin as a panelist, where you will be able to turn on your camera if you like. As a reminder, you do not need to give your physical address. However, please introduce yourself for the record before testifying. Also, please note that our microphones are a little hot, so if you get too close, it sounds a little robotic. Thank you. The first person on our list to testify is Kennedy Hawkins. And on deck is Brian Bellairs.
Good afternoon, Council President, Council members. For the record, my name is Kennedy Hawkins, and I'm here to testify in favor of the Sherwood West expansion being brought into the urban growth boundary as presented by the City of Sherwood. I've lived in Sherwood for 28 years. I have raised 3 kids there. My house and 8.3 acres is in Sherwood West. I've owned 3 homes in Sherwood, currently run 2 businesses there. And I've been active in the community through coaching in youth sports and involved in various community events. I also served on both of the Sherwood West Citizen Advisory Committee panels. And I'm testifying in favor for 2 basic reasons. First off is the median home price in the city of Sherwood is $732,000. That's based on data from last month. And so I have 3 kids. My kids would love to live in the city of Sherwood. And they simply can't afford to live there. I became a grandparent in June. I have another grandkid due in March of next year. I would love for my kids and my grandkids to be able to live in the same community where they were raised. And my story is part of many other people's stories in the city of Sherwood. It has just become unaffordable. And the main reason it's become unaffordable is the lack of developable land. So I was part of both Sherwood West Citizen Advisory Committees, and I can tell you the process was thorough. I can tell you that multiple avenues for input were available. You had record numbers of public comment and access to provide public comment, and I believe Metro should approve the Sherwood West expansion into the urban growth boundary as presented by the city of Sherwood. I believe the community supports it, and it's my recommendation that the Metro Council should support it as well. Thank you.
Congrats on the additions to your family.
Oh, thank you.
All right, next we have Brian Bellairs.
For the record, my name is Brian Bellairs.
I've been a top realtor in Washington County for the past 30 years. I'm in the trenches and I've witnessed vast changes to both housing availability and affordability during that time. Within 24 hours of her inauguration in January of 23, the governor declared a housing emergency. The housing needs analysis showed we have a deficit of 140,000 units. We are only building about 60% of the housing units needed each year. In the last 2 years, building permits have fallen even further. This crisis is only getting worse as interest rates have spiked. There's massive pent-up demand that is developed. The city of Sherwood has developed a comprehensive plan that is well thought out. It addresses the industrial, economic, housing needs of the city. It's just not adding housing units. It's building and enhancing the community of Sherwood. Since they have revisited and adapted the plan, they took it off the table and brought it back when they got it right. This is a great plan. It is needed, and the time for it is now. I urge you to incorporate Sherwood West into the UGB. Affordable home ownership is the American dream. It is important for the economic and social well-being of Oregonians. Thank you for your vital role that you play in this.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next up we have Jeffrey Kleinman, and on deck we have Mike Connors.
Thank you, and good morning or afternoon as the case may be. Council President Peterson, councilors, Metro staff, and members of the community. Jeff Kleinman. I represent the West of Sherwood Farm Alliance in opposition to this proposal. Alliance members have been observing and participating in Metro's Urban Growth Report and Urban Growth Boundary Amendments since February of this year. In their oral, online, electronic, and paper testimony, they have expressed their opposition to the proposed UGB expansion west of Sherwood. For your final hearing, I am reiterating, clarifying, and supplementing the Alliance's arguments and supporting information in the form of a letter that we have just filed of today's date, and that in turn is supported by 3 binders, 1,500 pages approximately of supporting evidence. We've delivered the binders to your staff, but we've also given them a thumb drive for convenience that has everything in one place. The concerns, issues, and information the Alliance has presented previously and today identify several specific problems with the legal analysis that's been presented, the gaps and contradictions in the factual foundations that have been presented, and defects in the process that's been employed to get to this point. In the few minutes allowed for public testimony, and in my effort to be as brief as possible, it's not possible to summarize the contents of the items I've just described or share them with you in any detail, but encourage you to give them a close look. Please do look at my letter of this date and the supporting evidence we've submitted. We support and adopt as our own the critiques by other participants who have filed in opposition to this proposal, and those include Housing Land Advocates, which is the nonprofit dedicated to locating and getting approval of affordable housing, not McMansions on the Hill overlooking Sherwood, Thousand Friends of Oregon, and Clem Riverkeeper. Want to make a couple of other comments, try to split them out within the time remaining. First of all, in the conditions of approval that staff presented to you today, there's not one that is mandatory or compels anything other than lip service down the road.
to the objectives that the conditions are directed at. Nothing mandatory at all. They can all be brushed off. Second, your council president spoke about lessons learned in this process, including vis-a-vis core, and said let's apply them 6 years down the road. I would say if you've learned the lessons, I'll finish my sentence. Sorry. I arranged for the musical accompaniment, but it was not well coordinated with the beginning of my testimony. I also had spectacular videos, but anyway, if lessons have been learned in this process relating to core and a number of other things, as has been described, then let's apply them now when they're fresh, not 6 years from now when no one remembers what they are. So thanks for your consideration. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. Next, we have Mike Connors, and then on deck, we have Sam Diaz.
Good afternoon, councilors. My name is Mike Connors. I'm an attorney at Hathaway Larson LLP, and I represent David Marks, who owns property in the Stafford Urban Reserve area. We submitted a comment letter regarding the draft urban growth report July 23rd, and also testified September 26th public meeting to articulate our serious concerns with Metro's methodology, meaning the entire approach to this urban reserve growth process. Our primary concern is that Metro is taking the opposite approach to what is required under Goal 14, as the Court of Appeals recently articulated in a 2023 case involving both my client, Metro, and several other jurisdictions. The Goal 14 approach, which Metro has used for decades until it abandoned it in 2018, required a two-step process. First, determine the need to add land to the UGB to address 20-year housing, employment, and industrial needs. And then second, determine where that expansion should occur to best accommodate those needs using the Goal 14 boundary location factors. For the 2024 UGB expansion decision, Metro has taken the opposite approach. First, it publicly announced its policy decision that it will only consider expansion into urban reserve areas for which a city has requested expansion and provided a concept plan. Since the city of Sherwood was the only one to do so, and is for a relatively small area, Metro has been forced to try to justify a limited expansion by adopting lower growth, population, and needs analysis. As Metro admits multiple times in its findings, this is a, quote, outcome-driven process, end quote, designed to limit UGB expansions to the Metro concept planned areas. As explained in the Court of Appeals Marks decision, Metro's unwillingness to consider urban reserve areas that have not been concept planned is inconsistent with Goal 14. Goal 14 does not even mention concept plans, let alone require that they mandate what can be expanded into. And although your code does reference concept plans as a factor, the court's decision made it very clear that it was one of several factors. Now, Metro staff hasn't really responded to the arguments that we've raised until relatively recently. But if you look at the roughly 600 to 700 page Appendix 7, which is the Goal 14 boundary location factor analysis, I think it's pretty clear that they understand we're raising a legitimate legal issue. And this was a document that was prepared after the September 26th public hearing. While we appreciate the attempt to try to address these issues and the Goal 14 factors, this type of backward engineering cannot cure the legal defects of your process. We submitted a November 19th letter, which I provided all council members, explaining why we don't believe that that analysis cures the defect. But really what it comes down to is the record is very clear. Metro determined in the very beginning of this process it will only consider concept planned areas, and that's a flaw under Goal 14. We urge you to take this issue seriously. We urge you, as Mr. Kleinman said, to address these issues now rather than wait 6 years. And you need to understand that if my client or other party were to challenge this decision or successful, you would have to redo this entire process. That seems like an extraordinary waste of time, resources, and money. And so we urge you to seriously consider it now before you make a final decision. And with that, I'll take any questions that you may have.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Sam Diaz. Yeah,
Is it on?
I got it. Yep.
Okay, thank you. All right. Deputy President Wong, Council, my name is Sam Diaz, Executive Director at 1000 Friends of Oregon. First and foremost, I want to thank Metro counselors and staff, especially Director Charlo, for the research and engagement to develop conditions. Arguably, I think they should be called protections, with the goal to improve the UGB expansion. Since we've last heard the item in September, we have new information to help plan for the future, and that is an incoming federal administration. I've been in over a dozen scenario planning strategy sessions. It's great to see some of you at these with elected officials, agency staff, nonprofit EDs, and community members asking what do the next 4 years mean for this region. 3 major takeaways from this conversation that add to existing evidence and arguments that demonstrate that we have thousands of acres of land, tens of millions of square feet sitting empty within the existing UGB. The role of local, regional, and state government will become that much more critical for advancing public health, environmental health and justice, racial justice, civil rights, and climate action. Stopping sprawl and spatial segregation by income and race by voting no today is one of the most powerful and important decisions you can make. That role will most likely come with less federal funding support. Our state legislature is already scenario planning for hits to our state budget. With a stroke of a pen, federally funded assistance programs, our safety nets, affordable housing construction and preservation, basic health care will disappear. And our state will be forced to fill the gaps as much as possible. With the limited resources projected, combined with the backlog of land readiness needs inside our UGB, we do not understand how, in good conscience, we can skip over vacant or underutilized lands, skip over our communities inside our UGB to pave over raw land. We have a responsibility to build approaches that outlast all of us as individuals in our current roles. We appreciate the conditions outlined in Exhibit B, but we're really concerned that the housing conditions are written in an aspirational manner and that there are no conditions on carbon pollution reduction. The conditions show that Metro is listening to community testimony and identifying pathways to comply with relevant law. We'd also ask that Metro explicitly tie these to Oregon Housing Needs Analysis or Metro's Climate Smart Strategy if you do decide to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have Amelia Larkin, and on deck we have Levi Lavasa.
Hi, good afternoon.
Welcome.
My name is Amelia Larkin, and I'd like to thank you for the time and chance to once again voice my support for the City of Sherwood's West Expansion Plan. I am speaking for the second time as I believe it is important for the Council to hear from the people who live there or want to make it their home and not be drowned out by paid mouthpieces for special interest groups, as the purpose of the Council is to make decisions that benefit the community as a whole. One main theme I've heard from the opposition is that there's land already available to develop, and what is true for that land as well as the land proposed in the expansion plan is just because it's available to be developed doesn't mean it will or has to be, but that the people who own the land now have the option to expand and develop. Current and potential residents want to build their homes and grow their families in Sherwood, and the expansion plan will give them the ability to invest in the future of Sherwood. Now is the time for growth, and it is necessary for Sherwood to be a viable community. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, now we have Levi Lavasa, and on deck we have Preston Korst.
Thank you, Deputy President Wong, councilors. My name is Levi Lavasa for the record. I am a resident of the city of Sherwood, and I'm here today to voice my support for the UGB expansion. A lot like Kennedy, who was up here before, I live in Sherwood with 3 kids, probably earlier in my stage of growth in the city of Sherwood, but it's my hope that in the future that my family can continue to build homes and community with Sherwood. I feel very privileged to live there. It's an awesome community, and I think this expansion will allow others like me to move into this area, not just Sherwood, but the metro region itself. It's a great place to live, and providing the necessary land for that housing and economic opportunity and jobs is obviously part of what you're here to do. And I think this is a chance to take that ball down the road. I've also been involved in the development community, building material sales for all of my career over the last 10 years. And just the availability of land is always know to be what holds back the housing needs that we have. And so Sherwood came up with a great plan with community support. Anecdotally, just being in Sherwood, there's a lot of support locally for this type of expansion, and a need for a variety of housing, like you heard earlier, and from the previous speakers. There's a lack of affordability, and a huge part of that is just not having the land to continue to grow. Check my time here. Being in the development industry, I think just understanding that the conditions you have laid out, just hearing some of the previous testimony, I think they need to continue to be aspirational. At the local level, that's where things need to be implemented. It can be a real hang-up when you start to add too many things onto the plate. I mean, you guys can't plan every subdivision, right? So there has to be a layer of that. And I think that this chamber understands that, and I hope to be continue to be engaged at the city of Sherwood and with people in the community to try and attain the goals of the city and the region as a whole. It really does take the engagement of everybody to get to where we want to be, and I think that process needs to continue to be left in a more detailed level to the local jurisdictions. So I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have Preston Korst, and on deck we have Kyler Fitch.
Thank you, Metro Council, for having me this afternoon. And if you want to play off music, that's fine with me. I appreciate that. I think it's a policy we should implement here, actually. So, for the record, Preston Korst, I'm the Director of Government Affairs at the Home Building Association of Greater Portland. I am here today in that capacity, but I have also served for the last 2 years now, both on the Sherwood Technical Advisory Committee for this expansion, as well as Metro Technical Advisory Committee and the Metro UGR Roundtable. So I've been busy, but I will say that, as Ted mentioned earlier, that the planning staff have really been quite busy and extraordinary in their outreach to all of the partners within the jurisdictions, but also with folks in the housing industry and economic development space. So I want to just first and foremost call out that and say, in general and with as much impact as possible, that HBA does support this ordinance and appreciate as well council and staff's thoughtful approach to the conditions of approval. We think that they provide a good balance for the city to work with the county, with Metro as well as with developers and builders to get a plan and a community that is going to we think thrive and really be a good example for future expansions down the road. So with that, I just want to say thank you to council and especially to the planning staff here at Metro. They've been the rock stars this past couple of years. They have been quite busy, and I really want to just demonstrate and offer our deepest respect for them. So thank you.
Thank you, Preston.
Thank you. Next, we have Kyler Fitch. I'm going to promote you to a panelist now, and your time will begin when you start speaking. Please make sure to unmute.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, I'm not sure if my video is going to work, but we'll start here. I spoke in September. I just wanted to reiterate what I had said. I've been an Oregonian my entire life, recently a Sherwood resident for the last decade, and in full support of the Sherwood West development in its entirety moving forward. And also to make sure we consider the property we own, a 38-acre property that includes a urban growth boundary, or excuse me, a conservation easement that's monitored by Metro. That's a 24-acre lot of Metro easement, leaving 14 acres of buildable, usable land. It just creates a natural backdrop to the end of development, and I want to make sure that that could be considered. But all the testimonies I've heard in favor of it, I agree with, and I think it's just a good thing for the city.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Terrell Smith. I'm going to promote you to a panelist now. And on deck, we have John Rankin. Please make sure to unmute yourself.
Hello, good afternoon, Council President and Council. My name is Terrell Smith. I retired recently as from a long teaching career in the Sherwood School District. I was hired in 1978, seems like ages ago, of course it was, and at Hopkins Elementary, which was the only elementary school at the time. And that school complex, along with that current middle school, was the anchor of Sherwood community for decades. As growth began to happen in 1972, the new high school was built, and which is the current middle school now, and that became the anchor of the future growth at that point in time. Then came Archer Glen Elementary and Middleton Elementary, and as Sherwood expanded to the west side of 99, the Ridges complex was built. Again, all of these buildings were anchors to the expansion of Sherwood, well-planned, supported by the community, and had to happen because of the pressures on growth, because people wanted to live in Sherwood. These expansions were logical, well-planned, that I just mentioned, and I was able to watch that happen through the students that came into my classroom. The new high school is now the anchor of the next expansion phase. And what an anchor it is. It is a showcase. It is a wonderful building. I was able to teach in that building and coach. I was a track coach for many years. And people would come into that building. They would come and look down on the facility from the upper parking lot and be amazed at what the Sherwood community put in place on the west side. So the community supports, the Sherwood community supports the Sherwood West expansion, and the Sherwood West expansion is logical, well-planned, and I dare say it will be magical. And I fully support the Metro West expansion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Terrell. And next up is John Rankin. I'm going to promote you to a panelist now. Please be sure to unmute yourself when you join. Great, John. You can unmute yourself and your time will start when you start speaking.
Yes. Can you hear me? This is John Rankin.
Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay, good. Thank you. Council President Huang and council members. I'm John Rankin. I'm a land use attorney. I've lived and worked for over 30 years in the Sherwood area. And at this point, I represent between 150 and 200 acres of property owners in the Sherwood West area. I've been involved since 2015 in the comprehensive planning effort that was begun then shortly after we had the urban reserve and rural reserve designations established finally in 2014. So from 2015 through today, I've been working with the city, working with the interested parties, certainly giving testimony in the last hearing. I've made some written testimony as well. I'm here just to say that my clients are very much in support of the expansion, and particularly as it relates to the industrial lands. Industrial lands, as you know, around the community, around the Portland metro community, are larger lot ones certainly are non-existent. If you've ever tried to look to buy some, as I have for clients, buy some industrial land in the area, there's very few to none any size lots over 10 acres in size. I want to also comment on the affordable housing issue. I agree with the prior testimony that you've heard. Affordable housing in Sherwood and a lot of the surrounding area and surrounding communities and in the Portland metro area is off the chart, in my humble opinion. Who can afford to stay in a community if you're a young person, as we heard testimony already today? So I think the Sherwood urban growth boundary expansion request that they've made of you has been simply the most well-planned that I've seen in my lifetime, going back all the way into the early 70s when we first started even thinking about comprehensive planning. Also, I'd like to address as quickly as possible the lawyers that have spoken here. Obviously, they've raised some issues that could have some traction, but frankly, your focus should be, in my opinion, on approving this expansion of the urban growth boundary and giving the legal authority that you have an opportunity to be decided by others, court system, etc. And I urge you to vote approval of Ordinance 24-1520, and thank you for the opportunity to make this presentation.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. Next up, we have Peter Foster.
I'm going to go here.
Perfect.
Good afternoon, Council. My name is Peter Foster, and I'm right above the high school west, up off Kruger Road, and I'm the contracted restaurant advisor to the city of Sherwood. So for the municipally owned properties that they have, I've been able to help businesses come in and operate and open up that way. When I first came to Sherwood years ago, I wanted to open this restaurant farm project that we're still hoping that with your vote of approval will happen and bring a big element to the community and just be an incredible asset to the community. And I want to bring vitality to Sherwood, and it needs it, and it needs housing that people can afford. Everybody loves Sherwood, but nobody can afford to live there. What if there was some middle ground for that? And what if new jobs could be created and the young folks that are graduating out of high school could afford to work and live in Sherwood? And I'm a chef, not a lawyer, but I've heard some of these arguments come up, and I just want to call out this 800-pound gorilla in the room, right? It's a myopic approach that these guys are paid by folks that have a lot of money and a lot of land, and they don't want anybody else to come in. And it's the myopic part is like they're picking out the details of what should and shouldn't be considered and maybe deficiencies, but ultimately it's a really good plan. And I represent entrepreneurs and people that want to bring opportunity to the area. And the 1,000 Friends of Oregon and all that, they kind of represent the older generations with generational wealth that would rather not see anything change. And I know your jobs cannot be easy, and you're going to have to look at a lot of things, and have looked at a lot, and I've been involved in this process for years. But I would imagine part of your job is to help our community grow and do it in an environmentally conscious way and otherwise an inclusive way as well. So I just wanted to call that out. I hope I see each and every one of you at my restaurant one day, and at this speed it will be open in 20 years. But thank you for your time. Thank you. Thanks, Dad.
Thank you. And I do not see anyone else online with their hands raised, and I also Do not have any more cards from folks that are testifying in person.
Okay. Well, I want to thank everyone that came out from Sherwood and around their region to testify. And yeah, just really happy to see that civic engagement in this day and age. With that, we'll close the public hearing. And as a reminder, we will continue to accept written testimony until the record closes on November 27th at 5 p.m. And I'd like to invite Councilor Rosenthal to say a few words as he represents his district.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. And I invite other people to make testimony as they would up until the deadline. The reason I want to make comment is I represent District 3, which includes Sherwood. And although I'm not a Sherwood resident, I am in the Sherwood School District, even though it's on the other side of Tualatin, which doesn't make a lot of sense. But anyhow, the one things I want to say is, Sherwood is a nice city, and I spent a fair amount of time there, and I like to hang out there. It's got a lot of amenities. The two themes that I've heard over the last 4 years with Sherwood are two things. One is they want it to be an affordable, multi-generational family living situation, and they want to be an open living situation, and they also want to create a number of job opportunities so people can work and live in the city of Sherwood. They have done a great deal of work on creating job opportunities, and with this addition they will create hopefully some others. So I heard those themes. I just want to point out that the attorney, somebody who spoke earlier, an attorney, said that it is noted that the metro conditions are not hard and fast. They're not absolute. And that is true. The burden of work is going to be on the city council and the planning commission and the residents of Sherwood to make sure that some of these conditions, these suggestions, and these opportunities get implemented so that it does become an affordable, multi-generational condition, so that people can, their kids and their grandkids can plan on living in the area. This is going to take a lot of work on the part of the city of Sherwood itself and on its residents, and I hope Metro will be there to help them with this, assuming that it passes. That said, I do want to point out one thing. One of the issues that is going to come up that's probably going to be the hardest is going to be dealing with the transportation issue in and around this area and through the city of Sherwood. I hope this raises the transportation issues in this corner of the county, in my district, to a higher level. Earlier today, we had a presentation about the Sunset Corridor, which is also an important industrial area, which needs a lot of industrial work. I think we need to have some similar focus on creating a better transportation system, better mass transit, better multimodal transit, and connectivity throughout this area. So this is something that cities also going to have to work on. But I think the ideas and the incentives are there, and I think that the intention is there on the part of the city and the residents of the city to do this. So thank you for your testimony.
Great. Thank you, Councilor Rosenthal. Okay, the second reading and councilor consideration are scheduled for December 5th, 2024. Next item of business is COO Communications. Andrew.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, this is going to pivot quite a bit from an urban growth boundary conversation to CO communications. But for today's, and I'm actually really honored to be able to sit in for Marisa today on this particular topic. So for today's CO communications, I want to take a moment and maybe we'll just wait. Is it okay, wait 30 or 45 seconds before we go into this, just because it looks like we're going to have some transitions? Thank you for that. So for today's communications, I wanted to take a moment to recognize Trans Day of Remembrance, which was yesterday. And before I go too much further into this, I do want to flag this is a topic that is very difficult, and it involves violence against the trans community. It is also deeply personal for many of our employees and many of our loved ones. And I will say on a personal level, as the father of a trans daughter, it is also deeply personal for me. For those who are not familiar, November 20 is honored every year as Transgender Day of Remembrance. It's an opportunity to mourn the trans, non-binary, and genderqueer people killed in the past year because of transphobic violence. and to spotlight the persistence of transphobic violence in hopes of sparking resistance. Trans Day of Remembrance was started in 1999 by Gwendolyn Ann Smith as a vigil to honor the memory of Rita Hester, a trans woman who was murdered in 1998. It has been held annually to remember and honor the trans loved ones lost to violence in the past year. This year, Trans Day of Remembrance is especially poignant as our trans loved ones and community members face the future with fear, trepidation, and uncertainty. Every year, we hope that there will be no new names for us to grieve and that our loved ones will be able to acknowledge the past, but look forward to the future with joy and optimism. Unfortunately, this is not that year. As a result, it's even more important than ever that we continue to step up to protect and honor our trans community members as they face a world that is increasingly fraught with transphobia and discrimination. And it's incumbent on each of us to work to create a world where the hope of a future free from fear and violence actually becomes reality. So I would like to take just a moment of silence with all of you. And as we do, I would invite us to look inward, not just grieve for those we have lost, but to also commit to the living, their future, and the year when we will have no new names to honor on Trans Day of Remembrance. And so if you'll join me just for a moment of silence. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for sharing that story and those remarks.
Thanks.
Okay, let's move on to Councilor Communications. Councilor Simpson.
Thank you, Deputy President Wong. I just want to report back. This week, I had the opportunity to attend the Cascadian Innovation Conference. Really insightful, but also I think appropriate for the conversations we just had. I think everybody's getting it now that we need to turn inward and develop our underutilized big parcels for housing and other things that work for communities that are already connected to transit and other aspects of community. So I guess people are listening now. Ooh, we'll take that one. I guess the brunt of it, though, was that even with our housing production goals, even if we were to hit them over the next 20 years between Vancouver, BC, and here, we will still be short 1 million housing units. So there's a lot there to unpack. We had some great speakers from the governor, and we also talked governors, and we also talked high-speed rail as well. So if you want to get a full debrief from me over the 2-day conference, I'm more than happy to share with you all.
Thank you. Councilor Lewis.
Sure, thank you. Wanted to lift up the work of the civic engagement grantees and our staff for putting on a tremendous celebration of their work on Tuesday afternoon. Councilor Gonzalez and Councilor Rosenthal joined me, and the power of that work will continue thanks to our work of doing the program eval and cementing the work that civic engagement plays into the region. So that is one thing I wanted to report back on, and then the other is I had a meeting, or I was invited to the meeting of the council for the city of Milwaukee. We discussed housing and our current conversations around SHS measure reform. Had really good engagement with every member of council, and will say that they have started to think through what the local projects that they've been working on with the county and how that might be able to transfer over to meet regional standards. But heard from them, yes, thankfulness for the county having helped fund some of their priorities, but would like to have regional standards. So that was good to hear from the first community that was kind of out of the gate on city level engagement on these conversations.
Great, thank you. Okay, seeing no further discussion.
Oh,
sorry.
I just want to add a footnote. I just hope that it's a Trans Remembrance Day, but I hope that we will also add to our lexicon both the words and the concept of two-spirit in respect for the indigenous people.
Thank you. Councilor Gonzalez.
Thanks, Deputy President Wong. Just real quick, this morning we had our JPAC meeting. Councillor Simpson, Councillor Lewis, and I were up bright and early. We covered emergency transportation routes, a second phase following a partnership that Metro has with the Regional Disaster Preparedness Organization. We're receiving federal funds to continue that work. And also we had a great show of leadership from Clackamas County leadership to present on the Sunrise Corridor and the visioning process that has been undertaken. So yeah, it's a good meeting, and December we will celebrate some folks that are leaving their current posts in terms of elected leadership, and we look forward to celebrating them there.
Great, thank you. Okay, well, now saying no further discussion, the council meeting is adjourned. Our next regular meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, November 26th, 2024 at 10:30 a.m. Thanks, everyone.